Hi, I'm Tristan Hall from Hall & Nothing Productions. I'm one of the directors here, and I'm here to talk to you today a little bit about us as developers and game designers and publishers, and about what games we have produced in the past and what we're going to produce moving forward in the future, and just tell you a little bit about us, so in case you're interested in our games you can jump on and follow us and subscribe to our website. So about 5 or 6 years ago I produced our first game called Gloom of Kilforth, which is a fantasy quest game which I designed to kind of reflect my experiences of playing Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games growing up. And at the time there was nothing really on the market that captured the sort of narrative aspects of a fantasy adventure game. And so most of the games that did exist were all about combat and fighting and rolling dice and beating up goblins and stealing treasure, which is all good fun. But I wanted to focus more on the sort of narrative, the story development of your hero growing through a kind of Dungeons and Dragons adventure campaign, but in one evening. So it wasn't to be a campaign game or anything like that. It was to take the focus was to take you from zero to hero within one sitting. So you could have like a big meaty adventure experience and capture all the sort of narrative beats of a huge fantasy adventure campaign, but in one evening with everything that you needed in the box. So you didn't have to collect expansions, or you didn't have to, as a dungeon master, you didn't have to read acres of rule books to sort of facilitate the game for your players. So Gloom of Kilforth, the fantasy quest game, was our first game, and that arrived back in 2017. And we're really lucky in that it's done very well. It's on its third print run now. It's going to go into its fourth print run, and it's been very well received. So off the back of that, I've been able to do other designs as well and produce other games, and some of which are behind me here. So the next game that we produced was the first in our historic epic battle system games, which are games based on history, basically. The battles, the first one is Battle of Hastings, which is the game's called 1066, Tears to Many Mothers, and it allows you to recreate the Battle of Hastings. So you play as William and Harold racing against each other to overcome a series of historical objectives that William and Harold had to overcome in order to get to Hastings in the first place and duke it out with each other. And so every card in the game is based on a real person or event from history, and the motivation behind that game was to try and produce a sort of Magic the Gathering style game, but again non-collectible. Everything that you need comes in the box, but with the same sort of high-end visual aesthetic. So all of the artwork is really sort of world-class, beautiful illustrations from a team of international artists that we have working on the game. And so it's very different from Gloom of Kilforth in that the system allows you to play it within like half an hour or 45 minutes. So it's the kind of game you can sort of break out on your lunch break, and every card details a little bit of the history of who that character was. So each significant character or event or unit that was present at the Battle of Hastings or in the events leading up to it is captured in the game. And so it's a 1 to 2 player card game. All of our games can be played solo. 1066 Tears to Many Mothers features full rules for playing against a sort of AI bot on varying levels of difficulty. And so we followed that system through to other battles in different parts of history. So the second game in the historic epic battle system, for example, is 1565 St. Elmo's Pay, which is about the Great Siege of Malta. So 1066 was quite successfully received as well. We won some awards for that, and so we've followed that same exact system. So it's the same game mechanics, but with a completely new set of art and characters for 1565. So you get to play as the Knights of St. John, holding off the island of Malta against a gigantic Ottoman Turk armada. So it allows us, with a different setting in history, allows us to tinker with the mechanics of the game. Whereas 1066 allows you to pit the Normans versus the Saxons, who are using swords and cavalry and crossbows and bows to fight each other. In 1565, we introduced the cannons, of course, that were used to blast Malta to pieces. And so there's all new sort of mechanics, but using the same underlying system. So because the system is interchangeable, you can actually pit, for example, the Knights of St. John against the Saxons if you were so inclined. If you had both games, you could combine those two history games together if you didn't mind the sort of anachronistic nature of doing that. And we are following that up with a third game in the series called 1815 Scum of the Earth, which is the Battle of Waterloo, of course. So once again, it's a whole new system. It's the same system, but it's a whole new game with brand new mechanics, brand new abilities, and obviously a completely different historical setting. And all three games, every single card in the game is based on a real person or a real event and has flavor text explaining who that person was, why they were significant, and then mechanics and abilities that sort of map with how influential that person was, or what their abilities might have been if they were cavalry, for example, their positioning on the battlefield and how that affects them. And for example, we have when researching these games, when I'm sort of burying my head in the history books and going through all of the cool events and stories that went into, the history of these battles, one of the great things was the opportunity to try and recapture the significance of characters by giving them values in the game. So like the stronger the card in the game, the more significant that individual would have been during the battle. And a great way of doing this, for example, with say 1066 Tears to Many Mothers, is that in the Doomsday book it's listed how many ships each of the Norman vassals brought over from Normandy, so you could ascribe a higher value, higher strength to, for example, Bishop Odo of Bayeux, who was Duke William's brother, than you would to Remigius the monk, who might have brought over one ship with a couple of monks in it, compared to Bishop Odo of Bayeux, who brought over 100 ships full of soldiers. So that's then reflected in the game, and as a character, Bishop Odo would be a higher cost to play, more powerful, have higher stats, and more cooler abilities, basically. So each of those games is obviously an extrapolation of the events of the history, but trying to give you a flavour of it, and also in a beautiful package. So all of the artwork is, on all three games is off the charts. And we've been teasing sort of our images for 1815 Scum of the Earth on our Facebook page and on Twitter and through our website as well, and all the links will be in the description. So if you're interested in the history side of things, it's completely different from Gloom of Kilforth, which is a fancy adventure game. These historic epic battle system games allow you to sort of delve into history, but without having to sort of play a dry kind of hex and chit war game that takes 4 or 5 hours or 8 hours, whatever, to play. This is the sort of game you can rattle through in your lunch break. It's 1066 is also available to play on Tabletopia. So if you wanted to try out the game and see if you want the, play the digital version first, you can certainly do that by going into Tabletopia. After Gloom of Kilforth, we followed that system with a sequel as well. So the latest game that we've just delivered to backers within the last few months is called Shadows of Kilforth, a Fantasy Quest game. And once again, it's using the same system as Gloom of Kilforth, so it's cross-compatible. So Gloom of Kilforth is a fantasy adventure game set in a kind of medieval western feeling environment where there are knights and dragons and elves and orcs and that kind of thing. Whereas Shadows of Kilforth, the game that we've just recently delivered, it's set in the same world but in the eastern area of that world. So the influences are more Japanese or Oriental, and you can play as ninjas or samurai fighting against Oni and Bakemono and all different kinds of creatures. So essentially it's the same system, but it adds loads of new tweaks and entirely new content. So if you have a preference for one theme over the other, you could pick that. Or you can combine both games together for like an epic fantasy experience. And in both games, you take on the role of a hero fighting back against this overwhelming tide of gloom that's invading the world of Kilforth. And it's spread by these evil, demonic creatures called Ancients. So it's your job to travel around the world, developing your hero's story and telling an epic tale called a saga within the game, and going on an adventure where you'll meet strangers, explore ancient shrines, and go on quests, rescue lost children. And there's also a little bit of goblin bashing and treasure hunting in there as well. So Shadows of Kilforth expands like those opportunities, those story possibilities. In Gloom of Kilforth, you might play as half-elf ranger, whereas in Shadows of Kilforth you could play as a veil-born sort of demonic Bushido, like a lordless Bushi who's wandering the world, trying to find their place in the world, but also fighting back against these ancient monsters that are causing this caustic gloom to spread across the world. So real sort of classic fantasy adventure stuff. We also produced a game called Lifeform for one of my favourite designers, Mark Chaplin, who has produced a whole bunch of games. He's got his own amazing back catalogue. And for Lifeform, he developed his own ode to the movie Alien. So without having the IP, of course, ours is very much an homage, where you play as a group of miners trapped on a gigantic labyrinthine spaceship called the Valley Forge, where everything is going wrong. The self-destruct timer has been activated, the ship is on fire all over the place, the crew are desperately seeking supplies to escape this doomed ship. They've got to load up on oxygen and or the halon gas and everything that they need to power the escape shuttle and escape, all the while being stalked by an unstoppable monster which is stowed on board, the eponymous Lifeform. So one of you gets to play as this Lifeform, this brutal killing machine that's stalking through the ship, picking off the crew one by one. And Mark has come up with so many unique and brilliant mechanics in the game where there are no hit points or dice rolls or anything like that. This beast is unstoppable, so if it catches your crew member, it will mercilessly rip them to pieces. So in order to avoid player elimination, every crew member player starts with 2 characters, because you are going to go through them quite quickly. And even if you lose both of your crew members, you get to take on a secondary role. So you're still supporting whoever's alive to try and get them off the ship and escape before it all explodes. And so you could become the ship's cat, for example, or the computer mainframe, and you're sort of shutting doors and ushering the crew safely off the ship whilst the Lifeform is bashing the doors down and dismembering whoever's left. And it's a brilliant game. It plays in about 90 minutes, and it's got this gorgeous, gigantic map of the ship which you're exploring in as you're playing through the game. And it has loads of really cool spins on like hidden movement, and the timer for the game, self-destruct timer, isn't just an arbitrary tracker which goes down every turn. It's actually a resource that the crew players use to draw cards. So you have to try and do what you can with your hand management, with the hand of cards, to get through the ship safely. But sooner or later you're going to need to draw more cards to be able to play more actions and more moves. And doing that is kind of like if I do it, I'm screwing over all of my companions because we're pushing the self-destruct timer closer to destruction. So there's always these sort of tension decisions throughout the game. It's a really beautifully implemented game. So that was Lifeform. The latest game we have just finished kickstarting in April was my latest game called Veilwraith. And this is, again, very different from all the previous titles. And it's primarily a solo game that you play against the game itself, but it does have a variant where if more people have their own copies of the game, you can play it together either cooperatively or competitively. And in Veilwraith, you are a strange creature that's been sent back by an impossible twist of fate after the world has ended. So all of our games are very sort of heavily thematic and narrative-driven games. And in Veilwraith, the world has been destroyed, and you are sent back as the title eponymous Veilwraith to try and restore what once was. And so you're sent into this bleak, black and white, destroyed world to try and gather memories and go through a kind of almost spiritual journey of discovery to overcome the wisps of memories that have been left behind and gather them together. And meanwhile, malignant spirits have been sent after you as well to try and destroy you. So it's a race against time to rebuild the world that was. And it plays quite quickly. It plays in about 30 minutes. But it has, with the expansion, it has 20 vignettes or scenarios that you can play through. So depending on how hooked into it you get, there is this like ludicrously huge campaign that you can play through, which takes hours and hours, or you can just play it in bite-sized chunks, on a lunch break or when you get 20 or 30 minutes spare, and just rattle through a vignette and see how well you do. So we're really excited about that. It's actually been our second most successful game after the Kilforth games. So I think it speaks to those of us who are trapped inside in quarantine looking for things to do to pass the time, and it allows you to sort of have a narrative escape from everything that was into this kind of bleak world, but it's also gorgeously illustrated, and the whole game is in black and white because all the colour and life has been leached out of the world, and so you get to play as this being that's exploring these strange environments, these broken ruins, and meeting these spirits who aren't always antagonistic. Sometimes you're just trying to put these spirits to rest and bring them peace and gather these keys, these memories of what's gone before. So all of our games you can check out on our website, allornothingproductions.co.uk, and you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at the links below. The Games of Kilforth Facebook group is our official group for discussing our games, and you can jump on there and join in the conversation. There are loads of veteran players who are on hand to help out with rules questions and tactics for our games, and to share stupid memes with you. And we've got a really lovely, friendly community, and we'd love you to join us. Even if you're not into our games, maybe to just come along and talk about the games that you like. We also run a podcast called Bored Chitless, which is currently on hiatus because of the quarantine, but we've got over 60 episodes in a back catalogue where we talk about games that we've played each week, but we also interview key characters in the industry, designers like Jamie Stegmaier and Isaac Childress and the Sadler brothers, and we just talk games with them and shoot the breeze. And so that's kind of All or Nothing in a nutshell. We're around if you ever want to speak to us. It's myself and my wife. It's just a two-man team, one-man, one-woman team, and it's us on the other end of the social media. If you ever contact us on Twitter or Facebook, we'd be delighted to talk to you about new games and the games that you're playing and about our games. And we hope you're staying safe, keeping well, and thanks for listening if you got that this far. It's great to be here and great to talk games. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.